Now, we're going to move on to our next session, and one that's important to me, and that's supporting the whole human. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a topic close to my heart. I have a podcast on it. You should check it out. But in terms of the frontline is actually the heartbeat to any organization. They deal with a diverse customer base on a day-to-day basis. So D&I isn't just a one-off destination. It's a continuous learning journey. So for this important conversation, I'd like to welcome on stage Russell Wigginton, President of the National Civil Rights Museum, Elizabeth Thompson, Founder and CEO of Intuitive Quest, and finally, Mark Person, VP of Store Operations at Dollar General.
Hello, everyone. My name is Russ Wigginton, and I serve as the president of the National Civil Rights Museum. It's an honor to be with you all here today and look forward to having a rich conversation about something that affects all of us, something that touches all of us, something that makes all of us uncomfortable. But we're going to do this together, because it's all about doing it together so that we can make progress as a country, as individuals, and we can be our best selves.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Thompson. I am the founder and CEO of Intuitive Quest. Formerly, I was the Chief People Officer for Southeastern Grocers, which is where I met Christine and Carol back in 2015. So I'm excited to be here. This is a topic that's extremely, extremely important to me, which is why I have ventured out to start a consulting company that does a lot of work around DEIB.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Person. I serve as Division Vice President for Dollar General, serving Division 5, which is mostly the North. But I'm here. I almost said good afternoon because my stores and my teams are on the Eastern time zone. So I have to kind of play back and forth, but extremely excited to be here and to take part in this conversation. And to your point, what this does for our frontline employees, it's a really important topic and something that I'm very passionate about. And by the way, I did not do my daily reinforcement training today. I know Matt's probably going to check that. And I have not hit the 100 question streak yet, so I've got work to do.
At the National Civil Rights Museum, some of you all may be familiar with it, some of you may not be. It's in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's the place where on April 4, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And every day we seek to inspire people to be their best selves, to have to chronicle the American Civil Rights Movement, and to have an experience that allows them to really understand our nation's history, not just for historical purposes, but how does that apply to today and how might it impact and influence us tomorrow? I have to say that listening to these sessions this morning hit very close to home for me, because the reality of it is our frontline staff at the National Civil Rights Museum are the ones who dictate and facilitate the experience for over 300,000 visitors annually, 40,000 of whom come from outside of the US. People of all spectrums, all political backgrounds, races, religions, all the things that we tend to use as points of differentiation, but are in fact, the commonality is that they are at this sacred space to have an experience. And the frontline staff nurture and support and empower people to take full advantage of that experience that they have. And so what I heard this morning was very affirming, and I can't wait to get back and remind my front staff of how important they are to what the National Civil Rights Museum means to the country and to the world. I occasionally get to engage with people as they are having this experience. But they see this guy, this goofy guy walking around in the bow tie, and they are just curious about who I am. But the people who are walking around with those museum t-shirts on, who are asking people if they need a tissue because they've had an emotional moment, or if they need clarification on some information they've just been exposed to that they've never heard the story told that way. Those are the people who make it happen every day for us. And my guess is those are the people who make it happen every day for you. And so for you all to appreciate the importance of giving your frontline staff the opportunity to grow and expand and be entrusted to make a difference is extremely valuable. And dare I say, most of us, I think, would agree, our recipe to success is about making sure that those folks feel like they can do their very best on behalf of the organization.
We appreciate the work you're doing, Russ. I think education is everything, right? We've talked about it. It starts with awareness and education in all that we do. And, when we talk about belonging and inclusion and diversity and equity, it's it's a fundamental need. I do a lot of work and research with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's level 3 when you look at belonging. So it's a fundamental need for individuals to be able to thrive and be successful. In return, that allows companies to thrive and be successful. So I think there's a personal why for all of us. That's, you always want to start with that. And before I turn it over to Mark, I'll share, one story about a frontline experience that's very recent, of why this work is so important. And it's actually my oldest daughter, who graduated a year ago with her master's degree in the UK. So go University of Manchester if there's anybody here. We got one. She came home, she came back to the States and was trying to figure out what to do and applying for jobs left and right. And I'm thinking, well, there's this great resignation. Shouldn't be hard. You've got a master's degree, you got a great undergrad. Somebody will pick you up quickly. It wasn't that way. It wasn't that easy, interestingly enough. And so as her mom, I decided to give her advice that maybe not every parent would give based on how much money was spent on her education. And I said, find a company that shares the same values as you, that you feel like you could have a sense of belonging with. And start entry level. You can build a career anywhere. We all know that. I saw everybody raise their hand where you built a career. I did that with Starbucks and was able to build a great career over 12 years with them. And I loved the company. I loved what they stood for. And I wanted her to do that for her. Forget, the pay check and then going straight into corporate. Find that entry-level job that works for you. So just quick to fast forward, it's been going on 6 months. She works for Lululemon. She loves it. She's the happiest I've ever seen. She started entry level. She's already been promoted into management. And it's a place where she can be her authentic self. So my daughter, she came out gay when she was 18 years old, and she's got tattoos, and I think they're great, and I encourage her to be her and be happy. And this is a place that she feels she can be her and feel like a sense of belonging there. And that's what we get to do in the frontline world. And that's why I think it's so special for everyone to understand the power of belonging and what that can do and how you can attract great talent and people with a really high education to come and work in your front lines if you have that environment. And Lululemon, I've studied them now, of course, are genius in this space. And they really do fulfill all 5 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you should definitely check them out.
Awesome, thank you. I love Lululemon, by the way. So, so why is it important? I think you hit on it. There's the why. So when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, employees want to work for an organization that matches up with their value system. And one of the reasons people leave is if they don't feel like they can be their authentic selves. So I know Halloween is coming up here in 8 days from now. People don't have to put on a mask when they come to work, right? People should be able to wake up and whoever they are that day, they should be able to take that same person to work. They shouldn't have to cover up their tattoos. They shouldn't have to change their hair color. Foot Locker talked about they were very SOP driven, very routine. We were the same way, right? It used to be you couldn't wear an unnatural hair color. Well, most of us, once we get to a certain age, are doing something that's unnatural.
Or you can just lose it all and not have to worry.
Right,
about
or you can just lose it all, right? But so what does that mean? So to the person that likes the blue, the pink, and the purple, why are they any different than the person that doesn't want to be gray, right? And so when you can wake up and be your authentic self and that person can show up at work, it's not just about being that you're valued, you're respected, you're heard. You're valued, you're respected, you're heard, and you're needed here. And when they feel that way, thank you. When they feel that way, they're gonna stay. And when they stay, we have a saying at Dollar General. I've got lots of DG folks here with me today, but we've got a saying that our customers' experience will never exceed that of our employees, right? So if they're not having a good experience, neither will our customers. So we've got to make sure that employee experience is the best that it can be so that we can then deliver that and pass it on to the customer.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love both of those stories. And as I mentioned when we came on stage, we spend most of our time at the National Civil Rights Museum working with, assuming, and dealing with this space of discomfort. Imagine that every day when we open our doors, we know there are literally going to be thousands of people who come through our doors who are uncomfortable for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes people come with tremendous knowledge about the civil and human rights experience and journey of this country. And they're uncomfortable because they have particular insight and they're feeling particular ways about what they might see or learn more about or have reinforced from what they already know. But the overwhelming majority of people are uncomfortable because they feel like they are stepping into this dynamic where they're going to be made to feel bad or guilty or ashamed because their foremothers and forefathers were ill-treated or were the facilitators for the ill treatment. That's what people think every day. And so they come in, you can see them, physically see them with trepidation. And so our job is to help them lower their sort of anxiety. And we just tell them, come as you are. What you know, what you don't know, come have this experience. Just come have this experience. And it's a complicated experience. Our history is complicated. It's nuanced. It's all about the moment and context and situation and individuals and eras, and it's all of these things. And we make sure you don't try to simplify and roll it up into one nice, neat story. There are no nice, neat stories. Raise your hand if you're a nice, neat story. Every single one of us is filled with complexity and contradiction. So why should our society, quite frankly, be something other than that? When you take all of that and you help people figure out that this is going to be a journey, and it's going to be a heart and head journey, then it helps people recognize that they too can find their way. That's what I tell people I want them to have. What kind of experience do I want them to have at the National Civil Rights Museum? I want you to have a collision between your head and your heart. I want you to learn some stuff, learn more deeply about some things, learn through facts and data and archival materials, some myths get overturned that you had been led to believe, and they're not true. or there's more to the story. And then I want you to see something that touches your heart. In any emotional or any kind of way that touches your heart. Because I do believe that when you have a intellectual and a heartfelt collision, you will remember it, you will refer to it in other contexts, you will see the humanity in our society historically. You will give grace to people who disagree with you today, and you will set the course for us to be our best selves tomorrow, so that when you want people to come work for you and be committed to you, you not only accept that they are showing up as their authentic selves, you encourage it, you require it, and you benefit from it.
Well said, Russ. Thank you. You know, I think as we think about being your authentic self, and you said it's not easy, it's hard, and we're all kind of our own mess in our own beautiful way. And, you know, another Maslow hierarchy of need is safety. And physical safety, definitely, but also psychological safety. And that's where I do believe that creating a culture of belonging helps through your ARGs, creating a place where people can come together, they can have real conversations, they can solve for issues that are happening out there, and creating a space where, you know, managers are equipped and have those tools and resources to be able to have those tough conversations as well with people who are struggling. 1 in 5 people in our country are suffering from a disability, and a lot of those are not disabilities you can see from the outside. So there's a lot more to this of feeling psychological safety, to feel safe in a space when you may have something that you're hiding and that you're struggling with, to be able to have leaders around you who support you, who are your community, is huge. I mean, we go from school to work, and that sense of belonging and that need for that safety in our life doesn't change. So we have to create a space as business leaders and as organizations for people to be able to come and feel connected in. But I talk to people all the time, and at some point everyone has felt like an outsider. And having, kids and go through the teenage years and how hard those are, at some point you're feeling like you just don't belong. And it's such a need. It's such a strong need to feel, but you can't get there without safety and feeling like it's safe to be able to do that. And even more so how belonging, inclusion, and diversity ties into all this. I know when Russ, Mark, and I had a conversation over Zoom, we were talking about the hard times in today's world. And I live in Jacksonville. It's where Southeastern Grocers is headquartered. And, there was the recent horrific shooting that happened at Dollar General. So the first question, I asked Mark is, how's the team doing? And, that's the reality of the world we live in. And I know, a few of you, I know Kroger's here as well, have experienced these things. So with that, I want to, turn it over to Mark to talk a little bit more around that piece of the safety standpoint and how DEIB helps in that space as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, we had a good conversation about that. And, all you have to do is just turn on the news, right? If you have been and listened to the news recently, whether it's shrink and theft and what's happening with retailers, that it's a tough go right now. And those interactions between customers and our frontline employees are getting more aggressive in nature. And we all know that. We also know that there are tragedies that happen, as you mentioned, whether it's Buffalo, whether it's Collierville, Tennessee, or whether it was Jacksonville, Florida. These things are popping up all over the country. And what would make someone on the front lines, and oh, by the way, there was this little thing called COVID a couple of years ago where we asked our frontline employees to still show up every day and provide service because we were deemed essential, right? And we ask them to put their lives on the line literally each day and show up, all right, and give our customers the service they needed while at the same time putting themselves at risk, right? So there are lots of things that would cause people to feel unsafe. We're asking our frontline employees to still push through that. Well, if we don't value them, if they're not respected, if they don't feel like they belong, why would they put themselves in that position, right? Why would we ask them to put themselves in that position? I've had the unfortunate experiences of where we've had situations happen inside of a store. And it didn't turn out to be tragic, fortunately, but serious injuries. And we had to shut the store down. Well, what made those employees want to show back up the next day was they had some frontline leaders, some managers that had connected the dots for them. They felt like they belonged. They were a part of the community, and they recognized that being closed is harming the community more than it is anything. And we want to be there for the community. That sense of we want to make certain we're doing the right thing for everybody around us is what got us back open. It wasn't the fact that we wanted to be open. I can remember getting that team together. Grayson Jensen is here in the room. He's one of our DG L&D team members now, but he and I were on the same team, and he was one of my HR business partners when that happened. We came in and we sat down and we did, counseling one-on-one with each of the team members, and it was them that told us, we want to open this store for the community as quickly as possible. We didn't ask, they asked. They only did that because they felt that sense of belonging and connection to the community. They understood that the mission that we have at Dollar General of serving others, we couldn't really fulfill that by having the doors shut. So it was them that pushed us and not us that pushed them. That's what DE&I and B will do when we treat people right.
Awesome.
I love that step forward from leadership. And in the previous session, Mr. Johnson spoke about the importance of the C-suite and setting a tone. Let's be clear. The C-suites in this country have not modeled what DE&IB needs to be for our country to be successful moving forward. That's a general statement, but I stand behind it. They have not modeled it. And many of them have not modeled it, not out of being people who are uncaring about others in society or people who don't see the humanity in others. They haven't modeled it because they've been haven't felt like they've had the tools, and it makes them extremely vulnerable. And it's hard to be vulnerable from the top. But when you are, it sets a beautiful, beautiful standard and puts you out above your peers in ways that you can't orchestrate or engineer. And so when our leaders in our corporations make statements and actually back them up with action, they find themselves a lot less vulnerable to having deficits in their personnel needs because people are watching. To Elizabeth's point, there are a lot of really talented people out there who are wanting to be employed and be involved with organizations that are not afraid to put their values on the table. So at the National Civil Rights Museum, through the bold statement from AutoZone, they gifted us $5 million to launch a corporate equity center in which we focus on training C-suite leaders. Their particular teams come together and have a day and a half experience with us that's rooted in the experience of the museum, understanding the historical context, meeting people where they are, and building the kind of muscle that it takes to step into these spaces where figuring out how to be much more people designed for the future. And we aren't without the sense of practicality. We have a neuroscientist, historian, and Wall Street executive consultation team. We understand the need to make money. We understand the risk, the calculated risk that it takes to step into these spaces. But we also understand that by not stepping in these spaces, you're potentially alienating your future leaders or people to come work with and for you. And so we're trying to help companies increase the likelihood that the best of the people in the talent pool have opportunities to grow and succeed in corporations. Last thing I'll say about that is there is data that shows a historical disproportionality of people of color who are deemed successful in their corporation, who walk in and hand in their letter of resignation, and everybody goes, "What happened? We thought you loved it here. You were doing so great." And their response is, "I've been mentored, but I haven't been fully embraced." Right? So you give me a mentor, but I haven't been brought into the family. And what does that mean? And if I have to answer that for you, then investigate what that means for people. Why is your talent who is deemed successful, why are they leaving at disproportionate rates? They're looking for a sponsor. They got enough mentors in their lives. They want a sponsor. They want the inside scoop in the same way that the other folks who are succeeding get the inside scoop. These are the kind of real conversations we have in the Corporate Equity Center in a protected environment, and the data to back it up to help companies figure out their path ahead. This is a journey. It is not a short journey. It's more marathon-like. And the places and the people who recognize that putting one foot in front of the other, it's nice to make a big grandiose statement. Trust me, I get a bunch of phone calls from folk who want to come have me join them in their grandiose statement. And I say, bless your heart. I want to hear about what you're doing on the daily, putting one foot in front of the other. And when you're doing that right, the press release will take care of itself and the people will follow.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I'm so glad, Russ, you brought up the C-suite. And the lack of representation there is still a huge challenge. It's a lot of work that needs to happen to make some progress in that space. And when it comes to the C-suite, and even having the conversations, and I work with CEOs now across the globe, and having the conversation with them about diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity, and getting them and their teams to understand the value and the why. And so I have, things that I tell leaders out there. So for all of you here in the room, there's three things you can do for your C-suite to influence this. And obviously, having a CEO who's bought in helps. But even if they're not, they can be convinced. But starting with awareness, and this would be the why. So I do a lot of activities with executive teams and we sit in this for a bit and find our why. And everyone has a personal why on why belonging, inclusion, diversity is important to them. And then next is a desire. So what is that desire? Well, that comes from personal stories and sharing that and hearing it and having leaders discuss their personal stories, listening sessions with ARGs and listening to other people's personal stories. That's the what there. That creates that desire. And then the third one there is knowledge. And again, we started, talking about education. We have to educate people. And that's the how, having tools and resources for all. All is the key word here. And so just, in doing this, a personal story for me was being many times the only woman in the room at who had a seat at the table was always interesting to me, especially since in grocery, at least for Southeastern Grocers, 70% of the customers are female. So we'd have discussions about our customers and, make around different assumptions and behaviors and making decisions. And I was sometimes the only person who actually went and used our loyalty program on a regular basis and was actually doing all the grocery shopping for my family and having discussions like, well, I don't know if you realize, but this doesn't always work that way. And that's where diversity and inclusion comes in, right? Like that's having representation at the table. And it's the inclusion piece is me being able to have a voice. Now the belonging piece is where people look to me. They came to me and said, what's your opinion? What do you think about this? That's bringing me in. And that is where I think, more companies need to understand we need representation because we need people at the table who represent our customers, and then we need to bring them into the decision-making process. So I think, when it comes down to our C-suite discussions, and when you all talk to your leaders out there, really start with asking them what's their why, and make sure you know your why.
Yeah, good point. It's really important that equity and inclusion is not by default, but by design. I think you mentioned people may be doing things out of conscious or unconscious bias, but we need to be very intentional about who gets hired, who gets trained, who gets developed, who gets a seat at the table, who gets inside the inner circle. And so you mentioned sponsorship. I started off as a frontline employee. I got into retail by default. I needed a job, right? That's how most people get into retail. You got tricked, right? You needed a paycheck, and then before you know it, they had you doing something else, and you learned something new, and so you stayed, and then So I started off. They needed someone to set up the sidewalks, right? Sidewalks were a big thing. They needed bikes and things out before school. I got tricked into it. I never left, right? But my manager saw something. He saw the way I did things, and he kept teaching me things, right? And so I kept that job, and I moved through college in retail. And then when I got out of college, I've got this degree now. What do? I went right back into retail, right? And started running stores again. And then I went from, manager to senior store manager to district manager. And all along the way, I had mentors. And it wasn't until I got to Dollar General when I got here that I got a sponsor, right? And that sponsor was, and it was the chief financial officer of the organization. So I'm having one-on-ones once a month with the CFO, and he's getting me into places I had no access to. I'm getting into strategic meetings that I didn't know existed, right? He's showing me how he walks through the P&L and the financial statements when he's having conversations with the investor community. No idea that how those conversations took place, how they took place. And so it was that sponsorship that led me to get into the role that I'm in today, right? Because he was like, hey, we got a guy that you all may want to keep your eyes on that's at the director level right now. So sponsorship is extremely important. So I'm glad you brought that up. And the other thing you brought up is it's great to make these grandiose statements, but our frontline employees have to see it, right? They have to see themselves represented at every level of the organization, right? We typically do a pretty good job of being diverse, most retail organizations, on the front lines. We do a pretty good job, right? But it's when we go beyond that, where that intentionality has to come into play. But they've got to see themselves represented. I had a fortunate experience to go to Buffalo, New York, maybe about 8 weeks ago. And I met a young man named Keyshawn, African-American male. And he saw me and he says, so how does one become a DVP? And I said, well, Keyshawn, how long, let's start with how long have you been here? He said, 3 hours.
Go Keyshawn.
Right. So he still writes me to this day. We exchanged notes. He sent me his resume last week, right? He graduated college. He did. True story. He graduated college. He's got an IT degree. But Keyshawn grew up in a family where they didn't have a vehicle. He still doesn't have a vehicle. He's working at DG to be able to afford a car. He needs to be able to afford a car so he can get to work. He wants to be able to go to work into the IT field, but right now he can't get there, right? And so that's a reality that happens. But people need to see themselves represented. So when he saw himself represented, he immediately said, how can I do more? So that's what happens when people get to see themselves throughout the organization.
Amazing.
Man, I wish I had Keyshawn's when I was coming out of college. Wow, I just feel like those are such rich comments that you both made, and it's about seeing yourself and visualizing and daring to dream. And the beauty that I get a chance to see on such a regular basis is, oh, by the way, the number of people who may not look like you, who step up as sponsors or resources. That's when, to me, that humanity side picks up. Those are the kind of stories that we lift up in the museum to help people connect with. I get asked often, what are your favorite parts of the museum? I certainly point to when you're walking up our courtyard and your head goes to the right and there's a wreath sitting outside of room 306 to commemorate where that fatal shot was fired. And that can be a lot to take in before you've literally bought your ticket or stepped into the museum. But one of the things that happens in that journey is you begin to see these points of contact and connection for freedom fighters, most of whom were 25 and below in age. Who was assisting them, who was helping them and mentoring them and engaging with them. And you see this wall that we have that's people who were arrested in Mississippi and sent to Parchman Prison, of college students, freedom riders from all over the country. And if you were to get a bio on each one of them, it essentially covers the entire gauntlet of how we tend to categorize people based on race and ethnicity and gender and socioeconomic status and religious beliefs and all the things, right? And they had one common belief, and that is all people deserved to be treated in a humane way and with decency. And they were appropriately naive in the beautiful way that college students are, in that powerful 18 to 22-year-old window where you know enough to try some stuff and don't know enough about what could happen on the other side. Stepping into that and doing what Keyshawn did, right? Being bold enough to say, I'm in my first day on the job and I want to be like you, right? Capitalizing on that energy and always keeping a little bit of that for ourselves. Because most of us have done enough and have been involved in enough to wonder if all this stuff is possible. And the reality of it is we need that 18 to 22-year-old vibrancy sometimes to say, absolutely it is. If we dare to dream, if we dare to make the right moves and take calculated risk, we too can get to these places where our society feels different, acts different, operates different.
Beautiful. And I love that the word dream in there, because it's something that, we have seen over the history of time. It starts with a dream. And I don't know who came up with this quote, but I've heard it and I've stolen it. So forgive me, I don't know who came up with it, but a dream without a plan is a fantasy. Remember that. And so it's great to have a dream, but you got to put a plan in place. And I think that's really where all of this comes into play. It's intentional. Diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity is intentional. And we need to have a plan behind all of that. And if you want to know if your programs at your company are working to support the whole self, well, the key to life is asking the right questions. So ask your employees. Don't ask your HR department. Don't ask your leadership teams. There's a huge disconnect there, by the way, between corporate leadership and what's happening on the front line. So go to the front line and ask them if what you're doing is supporting them from their whole self. Thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you. I'm going to ask all of my DG people to stand up. We've got Matt Metzger and the L&D team in for Dollar General. Thank you. Right. And I asked them to stand up because you said you got to have a great plan. It's got to be intentional. Well, part of it is you have to have great partners and a team that understands it. And so I was fortunate enough to be on both sides of the coin. I worked on the D&I side, worked closely with the L&D team for a while. Now I'm back in operations. And I can tell you, if all we do is, the strategy of DE&I and what we're going to do, all of that sounds great, right? It feels great. But if they don't feel it on the front line, if it doesn't come to life right there inside the store, then it doesn't mean anything. It was just a good plan. It was just a good speech. It was just a good training. We have to make certain that it comes to life and that our actions match our words. The L&D team for Dollar General fortunately put together some really good content around DE&I that we rolled out last December, not knowing how this is going to be received with our teams. Right? We didn't make it mandatory because we didn't want to hit it hard with a hammer and say you're forced to do this. So we said, hey, we're just going to announce it. We're going to see how it does. We were overwhelmed that within the first 30 days, we had over 45,000 employees sign up and take the training, right? And so that let us know that they really, not only did they want the content, they were waiting on us. We thought we've got to slow drip this, and they're like, no, we want this content. We want more of it. And so I can tell you that every month we're very intentional about recognizing if there's a special Heritage Month, right? Recognizing if there's a day, and that we're pushing that content, not just here, everybody that has an email, because your frontline employees don't all have access to email. We put it where they are. We put it in the daily reinforcement training. We put it on broadcast messaging. We put it on the schedule. Mm-hmm. We put it on posters in the break room. We put it on every place that you could think of that they may have eyeballs. How do we make certain that they know that we're all in when it comes to DE&I at Dollar General? So the plan, whatever you do, I would say you've got to make certain that it comes to action and that they actually see it coming to life. And so if you have to go back and ask one question, what can we do differently, or how can we get this going at our organization? The question that we asked at Dollar General on our journey is, who's being excluded? So before you send the email, before you take the photo, before you come up with the next process, but before you think about the next hire, next promotion, ask yourself, do we have all perspectives on this? And if not, that's where you start.
That's great. It's been a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.